So here's the second installment of the verbal instructions lecture. This part, we're concentrating on what's called internal focus and external focus. So whenever we give verbal instructions, we're going to tell the learners some things, and we can phrase it in a couple of different ways. And so if you look at these examples here, and I use my tennis examples because I play tennis, we could, for example, tell the learner when they're hitting a forehand shot, turn your shoulders and your feet and move your arm back and away from your body. And then whenever you're hitting the ball, you should swing your hand forward and up. So your hand goes forward and up. And when you contact the ball, concentrate on facing your hand where you want the ball to go. And then we could also give them something a little bit more advanced, that I want you to put some topspin on the ball. I want you to make the ball rotate forward. And how do you do that? I might tell you that you should bend your elbow and snap your wrist so that you can create topspin on the ball. So if you noticed, these verbal instructions really focus on what you should do with your body. It's the positioning of your body and how you should move your body. So your shoulders, your feet, your arm, your hand, your wrist. And this is often how we give verbal instructions. We tell people about their body position and their body movement. And this is pretty logical. So now look at the instructions that are on the right-hand side of the screen. It's the same ideas, only in this set of instructions, I really don't talk about your shoulders and your feet and your hand and your arm. Instead, I ask you to move your racket certain ways or concentrate on where you want the shot to go. So this set of instructions says, turn and point your racket toward the back fence. Swing your racket forward and up. Concentrate on hitting the ball where you want it to go, at your target. And to create some topspin, what you should try to do is hit the ball with the racket moving up. So both of these sets of instructions are about the same ideas, only the referent on the one on the left really is the body parts, and the second one is about the racket, the thing you're holding in your hand, and maybe about the goal outcome of the task. And this is what is called internal focus and external focus. The instructions that we give learners can focus their attention on their body movements and their body positions, and that's what's called internal, when I concentrate on how to move my body. Or I could give instructions that use an external focus, where instead of telling you to concentrate on your body position and body movement, I can focus your attention on the movement of the implement that you are using, the racket in this case, or the goal of the task. Create topspin, hit the ball at your target. So I can use an internal focus or an external focus whenever I give verbal instructions to learners. I'm going to show you a few other examples here. So again, we have the tennis example. I can tell you to turn your shoulders and step a certain way and swing your arm a certain way. Or I could tell you to move your racket a certain way. Or just hit the ball, for example, away from your opponent. Or hit the ball high or short, the goal of the task. There's a weightlifting example. The person here on the right is doing some dumbbell chest flies. And so it's relatively common to tell people that you should keep your wrists and your elbows bent. So you shouldn't lock your wrists and your elbows. And then you move your arms, of course, down and up, down and up. Can I give verbal instructions using not internal, but maybe external? Could I give you instructions about how to hold the weight or how to move the weight? In this case, move the dumbbells in a wide arc. There's a therapy example down there, working with a patient who is learning to use a walker. And so we might tell the person that you should move your hands and your arms forward, or we could tell them, well, slide the walker forward. So again, Internal focus instructions focus on how to move your body, and then external focus directs you to concentrate on moving the implement, the walker or the dumbbells or the racket, or on the goal of the task. So probably about 20 years ago, Gabby Wolf at UNLV and her students began to look at some research on giving people verbal instructions and what would happen if we gave them internal focus versus external focus. Now, before I start down this path, you'd say, well, why can't we give both? And I think that's a great question. Can't we use a combination of these? But in terms of research, let's just look at giving people internal focus versus external focus. I'm going to show you 3 experiments. This was the first one that they ever did. This was people, college students who were learning to play golf, and they gave them some instructions. There was an internal group, and all of their instructions focused on how to move their arms and their hands, which is probably relatively typical about learning to play golf. This is how you position your arms. You should, your arms are out in front of you. They might be slightly bent. You make it a triangle with your hands and your shoulders. And then when you move the golf club, this is what your arms and your hands do. Then there was an external focus group that didn't get any instructions about how to move their arms and their hands. Instead, the instructions asked them to concentrate on the movement of the golf club and the golf club head. And so this is how the golf club should be positioned. And when you swing the golf club, this is how the golf club and the golf club head move. And so these people got to practice for several days, and then they measured how good they were. And this was, you can see the data here. And higher scores in this, the way they scored this were better. And so you can see pretty clearly that the external focus group, the learners who got instructions about how to move the golf club, were much better during practice and also on a retention test later on when they brought them back a few days later and said, well, let's hit balls again and see how good you are now that you have processed this. And the people who got external focus instructions were better. It was better to learn the task with external. So this was relatively controversial whenever this first came out. I mean, should we not tell people how to hold their arms and their hands? Well, for this study, what they found was it was better for me to not tell you about your arms and your hands, but concentrate instead on the implement that you are holding. So here's another study. Again, Gabby Wolf and one of her students. This is a student who is probably a swimmer. They didn't focus here on beginners, but what they went out and did was found people who were competitive swimmers, and they had them just swim some laps in the pool. And so this was timed laps. I think they had to do 3 laps back and forth, and this was for a goal time, go as fast as you can. And sometimes they swam using an internal focus, in which case they said concentrate on the actions of your hands and how you pull your hands back. So if you're thinking about swimming the American crawl, or the stroke on your with your face in the water, when you put your hand in the water, you bend your arm and then you push your hands all the way along your body. And so that I want you to concentrate on pulling your hands back. Then they also swam some laps that they concentrated not on their hands per se, but they said concentrate on pushing the water. That was the attentional focus. Push the water. And so here's the data. This is how fast people swam the laps. And you can see that people swam faster when they used the external focus cue, thinking about the water, than whenever they swam when they thought about their hands, the internal focus cue. So this was a second experiment that compared internal and external focus and found that external focus was better. Here's one more. Louisa Racebeck over at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, has a relationship with a target shooting range close by the school. And she does a lot of work with police and military and also people who are learning to shoot. So this was shooting a handgun, and they were shooting at targets. And so as they got instructions, They manipulated whether you got internal focus or external focus cues. And they also manipulated how many things we asked you to concentrate on whenever you shot. So if you think about internal focus cues for shooting, I could ask you to concentrate on, I don't know, keeping your body real still, concentrate maybe on tightening up your core. I might ask you to concentrate on keeping your arm really still or keeping your eyes straight ahead. All of those would be internal focus cues. And there were people in the study who got internal focus cues, how to position your body, what to concentrate on about your body, your hand, your elbow, your shoulder, your core, etc. And some of those learners got 3 different cues that were all internal. For example, head, elbow, core. And then there were people who also just got 1 cue. Then there was other people in the study who also got just external cues. So whenever you shoot, what are some external cues? Well, I could ask you to concentrate, for example, on keeping the gun real still, right? Or keeping the gun stock, the handle, straight up and down. Or concentrate on the target. Those would be external, thinking about the gun itself or the target. And in this study, there were individuals who got 3 external cues or 1 external cue. So the study looked at internal and external instructions and also the number of cues that people concentrated on. Now the data show, and it's an accuracy score, how many points you scored, and higher scores are better. You can see that they measured them at baseline, how good they were before any instructions. And then they practiced over the course of some time. That's the acquisition data. And then you can see at the end on the right-hand side, there's immediate retention and immediate transfer, delayed retention, delayed transfer. So the transfer, the retention task was, of course, shooting at a target that you've been practicing at. And then they had a transfer task where they moved them further away from the target. And they measured this measures of learning, retention, and transfer immediately, and then again about a week later. So I've highlighted a couple of the groups. The group that performed the best is the ones in the red dots, and that was external focus 1 cue. So when you shot, I asked you to concentrate on 1 external cue. Hold the gun still. Keep the gun barrel level. Or look at the target. 1 cue though. The next best group was the group who got 1 internal cue. Concentrate, for example, on keeping your hands still, or keeping your shoulders still, or tightening up your core. But just concentrate on 1 internal thing. The groups that got 3 cues weren't as good. It wasn't as good to ask learners to concentrate on 3 things whenever they shot. So this is an important study. 1, again, external focus, instructions that focused on the gun and the target was better for shooting than me to tell you to concentrate on your body position per se. And it was also better for me to give you 1 thing to think about at a time. So this study probably helps us a little bit more with how much verbal instructions should we give people, or how many things should we have people concentrate on, and it looks like fewer is better. This is a slide that just summarizes some of the internal versus external focus research. At the top, I've listed a handful of articles that have studied a lot of different kinds of motor skills that compared an internal focus versus an external focus. For example, you can see the Marchant study. The instructions were about, for example, darts, how to hold it with your fingers, how do you move your elbow and your hand when you throw, versus instructions that focused on the action of the dart. So there was a reference of the dart in all the instructions, as opposed to necessarily your hands and your arms. And in that study, the external focus condition was better. And in all of these 5 studies, the external focus is better. So this is pretty consistent. Research consistently finds that if I only give you internal or only give you external, that it's good for me to give you an external focus cue. The 2 studies at the bottom are a little bit different. Charles Agar, actually, who was a master's student here at Southeastern, wanted to look at internal and external focus with children. This was kids who were like 5 to 7 years old, and they were learning shuffleboard, and they gave them internal focus instructions. For example, that you should step forward with one foot, that you slide your hand past your hip. That would be internal focus. Or they gave them external focus instructions that really didn't tell you about your hands and your feet, but the attention was on the stick itself and the puck that you were using. And what they found in this study was that either one of those kinds of instructions was good. It didn't matter if it was internal or external focus for young children. The last study at the bottom used this simulated baseball hitting or softball hitting task. It was a computer game, really, and people got to stand there with the bat and hit an imaginary ball coming towards them. So this was probably some kind of a virtual reality experiment. And the instructions for the internal focus was, again, how to position and move your arms when you hit, versus external focus, pretty typical, movement of the bat, how the bat should be positioned and how the bat should move through the hitting zone. In this study, they found that internal focus was better for beginners. If you didn't have any experience, it was important for me to tell you how to position and move your arms and your hands. But for people who are expert hitters, it was better for them to think about moving the bat a certain way. So this might suggest that early in the learning process, we might give some internal focus instructions. This is how you position your body. This is how you should move your body. But then once you have the hang of it, we can shift you to external focus. All right, last slide here. Current evidence and thoughts about internal and external focus. One, in just about every study that's been published that's compared internal and external focus, the external focus condition enhances learning and performance, especially whenever I'm using an implement. So if I'm holding a ball or a bat, or I'm kicking a ball, or I'm anything that I have implements, I'm holding it, if I can give people instructions about how to move the implement, it's really a good idea. And so when possible, we should try to think of and use some external focus instructions. Now, it might not be possible to think about external focus instructions all the time. For example, if I want you to position your feet a certain way, or I want you to bend your knees, well, it's probably hard for me to not tell you that directly. You know, bend your knees. That's an internal focus cue. So it's likely that we're going to use a little bit of both. But we should really strive to create some external focus cues when possible. The last little bit here is, well, why is external focus better? Why should we use external focus cues? I really don't know, but in motor learning, we'll collect some data, and we can report this phenomenon, this observation, and then try to develop a reason or a theory why it should work. And so Gabby and her students have developed what's called the constrained action hypothesis. When you think about constraining, it sounds like it's good, like you're restricting movements. And so this is basically the basics of their explanation. Whenever I use internal focus, and I tell you to concentrate on the position of your feet, bending your knees, how your arms go, particularly if I give you several things to think about, that your focus on the position and the movement of your body parts creates conscious control of those actions and disrupts your overall coordination. So if I'm teaching you tennis and I tell you how to position your feet and to bend your knees and to move your arm a certain way, you'll probably do those things, but it might not flow. it might disrupt the overall coordination process. Sometimes that's been referred to as paralysis by analysis. If you concentrate on too many things, specifically different parts of the action, then you're going to move with these stiff, kind of uncoordinated actions. And that might not be good for performing motor skills. On the other hand, if I give you external focus, if I just say, make the golf club make a long, smooth arc, or concentrate on putting top spin on the ball, well, it allows you to use what they call your automatic control processes. It allows you to make your coordination pattern or make your body do some pretty natural things to create the actions, and that as a result, you have better overall coordination. The action flows more. I personally have, kind of some difficulty with this theory. I'm not sure what automatic control processes are, but I think about it in terms of, for example, if I was trying to jump as far as I could, do a standing long jump, and I told someone, bend down real low and swing your arms really big. Well, you might actually do that. You might make big arm actions and you might bend down really low, but you might not jump quite as far because you're concentrating on bending your knees and swinging your arms and not necessarily jumping far. So our instructions might have them concentrate on jumping as far as they can, or picking a spot on the ground and jump over that. And you'll naturally do some pretty good things to be able to jump far. So that's internal and external focus. The key idea here is that we ought to try to use some external focus instructions if we can.